The galaxy had watched for centuries as the Draconian fleet swept through the stars, conquering planet after planet with ruthless precision. No world was too small, no race too powerful. The Draconians were a fearsome species, known for their advanced technology, massive warships, and unyielding desire to expand their empire. Their fleet, which consisted of hundreds of colossal ships, had crushed even the most advanced civilizations. Earth, a small and unremarkable planet in a distant part of the galaxy, had long been ignored by most alien species. Its inhabitants were considered weak, primitive, and no match for the might of the Draconians. So, when the first Draconian warship entered Earth's atmosphere, the galaxy was sure of the outcome. The Earth would be the next to fall. The Draconian fleet had arrived without warning, appearing out of nowhere in Earth's orbit. Massive, dark ships, each one the size of a small city, loomed above the planet. Their sleek, intimidating shapes cast shadows on the ground below. On Earth, panic spread quickly as governments scrambled to respond. The United Nations called for an emergency session, and military forces mobilized across the world, preparing for the inevitable battle. But no one knew what to expect from the Draconians. In space, the Draconian fleet's flagship, a terrifyingly advanced vessel known as the Drac Corps, hovered silently, its enormous size blocking out the sun. Its hull was lined with weaponry that could obliterate entire cities with a single shot. Its crew, made up of the most skilled soldiers and engineers in the galaxy, prepared for the conquest of Earth. The fleet's commander, Lord Zarek, was known for his cold efficiency. He had led the Draconians to victory countless times, and there was no reason to believe this time would be any different. As the world watched in fear, Lord Zarek issued his first demand to Earth's leaders: surrender immediately or face total annihilation. The message was broadcast across every communication channel. For hours, Earth's governments debated. Military leaders pushed for resistance, while political leaders argued for peaceful negotiation. In the end, there was no choice. The Earth would fight back. The first battles were a shock. The Draconian fleet had expected Earth's forces to crumble in an instant. After all, how could a small planet of primitive humans stand up against such an advanced, battle-hardened empire? But Earth's soldiers, though lacking advanced technology, fought with unmatched determination. Using guerrilla tactics, hidden underground bases, and sheer willpower, they managed to delay the Draconians' advance. Lord Zarek watched this resistance with growing frustration. His fleet had encountered many worlds before, and they had always bent to his will. The human resistance was unlike anything he had seen. These primitive humans were resourceful. They used the environment to their advantage, setting traps and using their knowledge of the land to fight back. As the days passed, Lord Zarek's fleet was forced to deal with unexpected setbacks. Human fighters, though outgunned and outmatched, struck with surprising effectiveness. One of the most shocking moments came when a small group of human pilots managed to board one of the Draconian ships. Using crude but effective methods, they managed to infiltrate the ship and disable several key systems. The Draconians were not used to this kind of resistance. In their eyes, humans were meant to be easily defeated, no match for their superior weapons and technology. Yet here they were, struggling to hold control over a planet that had no significant military power. As the Draconian fleet's ships hovered over major cities, they expected to see the humans surrender in fear. But instead, Earth's citizens rallied together, refusing to give up. Around the world, news stations broadcast images of people standing strong in the face of danger. From the streets of New York to the remote hills of Tibet, humanity united in a way never seen before. Families, soldiers, and civilians alike fought side by side, determined to protect their homes. The Draconians had underestimated Earth in the worst way possible. Lord Zarek, standing on the bridge of the Drac Corps, began to realize that this would not be as easy as he had thought. Earth's defense was not just about weapons or technology. It was about something deeper, something that made them different from any species he had encountered before. The humans did not surrender. they did not back down. They fought with a fierce determination that could not be crushed by simple force. The galaxy, watching from the shadows, waited with bated breath. What would happen next? Would Earth fall like the others before it? Or would humanity prove that even the mightiest fleet in the galaxy could be stopped? No one knew, but one thing was clear. The Draconians had underestimated humanity in the worst way possible, and that mistake would haunt them. The Draconian fleet had underestimated the humans of Earth, but as the battle dragged on, it became clear that their arrogance was their greatest mistake. Lord Zarek, the fleet's commander, paced the bridge of the Drac Corps, his face a mask of frustration. The fleet had launched wave after wave of attacks on Earth's cities, expecting swift victory. Yet the humans stubbornly refused to surrender. They had been expecting them to fold, but instead, Earth fought back with an intensity that shocked the Draconians. On the ground, Earth's military forces had quickly adapted to the situation. Although they were not as advanced as the Draconians, they were quick thinkers and had a natural talent for improvisation. In every city, in every corner of the world, humanity was fighting back in ways that the Draconians had never expected. In the heart of New York, human soldiers set up ambushes for the Draconian forces. Using the city's dense urban environment to their advantage, they laid traps that slowed the advance of the fleet's soldiers. Draconian weapons were powerful, but humans were more resourceful. They used everything around them, buildings, cars, even everyday tools, to fight. Every street corner became a battleground, with humans working together to defend their homes. The Draconian fleet, with all its advanced technology, had difficulty handling the chaos on the ground. For the first time, their superior weapons were not enough to guarantee victory. The Draconians had always relied on their advanced technology to overwhelm their enemies, but on Earth, that advantage began to slip away. The humans' ability to adapt, to fight without the high-tech weapons the Draconians relied on, forced Lord Zarek to make difficult decisions. "We didn't expect this," Zarek muttered as he stood before his officers. "They are not as weak as we thought." His officers stood in silence, unsure how to proceed. The Draconians had expected to crush Earth's resistance with their unmatched firepower, but now they found themselves locked in a brutal conflict with an enemy that wouldn't break. On the front lines, a young human officer named Captain Sarah Hines led a team of soldiers to destroy a Draconian communications tower. Using old maps of the city and basic equipment, Sarah and her team infiltrated the Draconian lines. The Draconians had sophisticated sensors that could detect most forms of human technology, but the humans knew how to hide in plain sight. With stealth and precision, they managed to sabotage the tower, sending the Draconian forces into confusion. The Draconians, unable to communicate with each other, found themselves disorganized and vulnerable. Meanwhile, across the globe, civilians were also playing their part. Ordinary people, who had no military training, took up arms to defend their cities. In Africa, groups of farmers worked together to set up defensive positions against Draconian invaders. In Europe, young students and teachers formed resistance cells, sharing information and coordinating attacks on Draconian supply lines. Humanity was united in a way no one had ever seen before. People of all ages and backgrounds fought together as one. Back at the Draconian command center, Lord Zarek's patience wore thin. He ordered his fleet to escalate their attacks, but the humans were proving harder to defeat than anticipated. The Draconian warships began to target civilian populations, hoping to break the human will by causing fear and destruction. But even this brutal tactic didn't yield the results they expected. Instead of surrendering, more humans rose up. Every act of destruction only fueled their anger and determination. Human resistance fighters had learned quickly. They now knew the weak points in Draconian technology and were using this knowledge to their advantage. They had found ways to exploit the gaps in the Draconian defense systems, attacking vulnerable spots on the ships, disabling their weapons, and making it harder for the Draconians to control the battlefield. The humans' cleverness and persistence were starting to have an effect. Lord Zarek watched as his fleet began to suffer unexpected losses. Ships were being damaged, supplies were running low, and morale was starting to falter. The Draconians had always considered themselves the rulers of the galaxy, but now they were fighting an enemy they could not predict. Humans, despite being outnumbered and outgunned, were proving that their will to fight was far stronger than the Draconians had ever imagined. In a meeting with his commanders, Zarek stood still, his eyes scanning the holographic displays of Earth. "We must crush them. They cannot be allowed to defy us," he said, his voice cold and calculating. But even as Zarek plotted his next move, the humans were doing something he couldn't have anticipated. They were organizing, learning, adapting, and growing stronger with every passing day. Earth's resistance was no longer just a struggle for survival. It had become a symbol of defiance. The humans were proving that they would not be pushed around. They would fight until the very end. And so, as the battle raged on, the Draconians began to realize that this war would not be like any other they had fought. Earth was not just another conquered world. Humanity had something more than just weapons. It had heart, and that made all the difference. As the battle for Earth raged on, the Draconians began to realize the full extent of humanity's determination. Lord Zarek had been confident that his fleet would wipe out the human resistance in no time, but the humans kept surprising him. Each day that passed, their resolve only seemed to grow stronger. The Draconians had never faced an enemy quite like this. In the midst of the war, the humans were not only fighting back, but were also becoming more organized. Earth's military forces had put aside their differences, uniting under one common goal. The war was no longer just a battle for survival. It was a struggle to protect their home and way of life, and that gave them strength. In a hidden command center deep within the mountains of North America, General Marcus Lewis stood before a large map, studying the movements of the Draconian fleet. He was the leader of the Earth Defense Coalition, a group formed from the remnants of Earth's scattered military forces. The coalition had grown in strength, uniting soldiers, engineers, and even civilians who had learned to fight in the chaos of the war. They were now on the offensive, planning their next moves carefully. "We need to hit them where it hurts," General Lewis said, his voice steady but full of determination. "Their supply lines are vulnerable. If we can disrupt their resources, we can force them to retreat." The general's plan was risky, but the humans had nothing left to lose. Earth's cities were in ruins, and the Draconians had shown no mercy. The time for defensive measures had passed. Now, it was time to strike back. Across the world, resistance groups were already putting the plan into action. Small teams of soldiers, working in secret, infiltrated Draconian supply ships and transport vessels. Their goal was simple: sabotage. They knew that if they could slow down the Draconian fleet's operations, the war could take a turn in their favor. The humans didn't have the firepower to match the Draconians in open combat, but they had something else: the will to fight with everything they had. In the heart of Europe, Sarah Hines, now a symbol of human resistance, led a daring raid on a Draconian fuel depot. Her team moved under the cover of darkness, using the forest as their shield. The humans had learned to use their environment to their advantage, and they had become experts in stealth. As they neared the depot, Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline. The Draconians may have had the superior weapons, but they did not understand Earth the way the humans did. "Stay quiet," Sarah whispered to her team. "We move fast, and we hit them hard." With swift precision, the humans disabled the Draconian fuel supplies, causing a massive explosion that sent shockwaves through the Draconian fleet. The blast was loud enough to be heard miles away, but it also sent a clear message to the invaders: the humans were not giving up. The Draconians had underestimated them from the start, and now they were feeling the consequences of that mistake. Back at the Draconian flagship, Lord Zarek stood in front of a massive holographic display, his brow furrowed. He had received reports of the sabotage, and it was clear that the humans were becoming more than just an annoyance. The fleet's supplies were dwindling, and the morale of his soldiers was beginning to falter. The Draconians were used to crushing their enemies without effort, but Earth was different. The longer they stayed, the harder it became to defeat the humans. The humans are resourceful, Zarek said, his voice low and filled with frustration. They fight like they have nothing to lose. His officers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to respond. It was clear that the situation was no longer under control. Lord Zarek had come to Earth expecting to add another conquered world to his empire, but instead, he was faced with an enemy that refused to submit. And the longer the humans fought back, the more Zarek began to question whether they could be defeated at all. As the days passed, the humans continued their strikes, each one more daring than the last. Earth's resistance groups worked tirelessly, setting up traps, sabotaging Draconian equipment, and gathering intelligence. They were no longer the helpless civilians they had once been. They were fighters, and they were learning to win. In the skies above, Earth's military forces were becoming more skilled at engaging the Draconian ships. Although the human ships were far smaller and less advanced, they had adapted to the Draconian tactics. The humans used their knowledge of the terrain to set up ambushes in the skies, picking off Draconian warships one by one. The Draconians, caught off guard by this unexpected challenge, began to struggle against Earth's guerrilla tactics. And then, as if on cue, Earth's people began to rally around one unifying idea: resistance. Cities, villages, and towns that had once been isolated now communicated with each other. The human spirit, which had seemed so fragile in the beginning, was now unbreakable. The humans had made it clear Earth would not fall without a fight. Lord Zarek could feel the tide of the war turning. The Draconians were losing ground, and they were starting to feel the weight of their underestimation of Earth. The once proud fleet was now struggling against an enemy they could not understand, and Lord Zarek's confidence was beginning to slip away. One thing was certain: the Draconians had come to Earth to conquer, but instead they were witnessing the rise of a new force. Humanity had been underestimated, but now they were showing the galaxy exactly what they were capable of. The Draconian fleet was starting to show signs of strain. What had once been an unstoppable force was now stumbling. Lord Zarek, standing on the bridge of his flagship Drac-Kor, couldn't ignore the troubling reports that came in every hour. His fleet, which had been designed to conquer entire worlds, was being outmaneuvered by a species that had once been considered primitive. Lord Zarek, one of his officers, spoke cautiously. "We've lost contact with the 5th Battalion. They were ambushed near the southern hemisphere." Zarek clenched his fists in frustration. The humans had not only resisted, they had begun to anticipate their moves. His once mighty fleet was being torn apart by a relentless enemy that refused to give up. The humans were proving to be a far more challenging opponent than he had ever imagined. "Continue to search for them," Zarek ordered, his voice cold. "Do not let a single one of them escape." But deep down, Zarek knew that this battle was slipping away from him. The humans had taken control of the skies, the cities, and now, even the very resources the Draconians depended on. Every day, more sabotage occurred. The Draconians had been so focused on their overwhelming power that they had failed to account for Earth's willpower, and now it was proving to be their undoing. Across the world, the humans were feeling the momentum shift. Resistance fighters, soldiers, and even everyday civilians had begun to sense that the Draconians might actually be defeated. News of their successes spread quickly, and a sense of hope began to rise among Earth's people. They had fought back, and they were winning. In the heart of London, a small group of soldiers had just captured a Draconian officer. Lieutenant Eva Martinez stood over the prisoner, her face hard with determination. The officer was shackled, but his eyes were filled with defiance. He had been captured during a raid on a Draconian transport vessel, one of the many that Earth's forces had been targeting. "We've got the information we need," Eva said to her team. "This officer knows their movements and their weaknesses. We'll use it to strike harder." The humans were growing smarter. They had learned the Draconians' tactics and, more importantly, their weaknesses. It was no longer just about resistance. It was about victory. Earth's forces now had the advantage of surprise. They knew the Draconian fleet's movements before the Draconians did. With every piece of information they gathered, they grew stronger. Every victory, no matter how small, pushed them further toward their goal. Meanwhile, back at the Draconian command center, Zarek's frustration was reaching its peak. The humans were no longer just a nuisance. They were a serious threat. He had ordered his fleet to attack more aggressively, to crush any form of resistance, but it was only making things worse. The humans were showing resilience in ways he hadn't expected, and his own troops were beginning to question their ability to win. Lord Zarek, another officer said, stepping forward, "The fleet is beginning to request reinforcements. We are stretched too thin. The humans are everywhere." Zarek's eyes narrowed. He had always believed the Draconians could handle any challenge, but now his confidence was shaken. "Reinforcements," he muttered under his breath. "We do not retreat. We do not need reinforcements." But even as he said the words, he knew the truth. The Draconians had underestimated humanity's ability to fight back, and now they were paying the price. The humans had become more than just a nuisance. They were a force to be reckoned with, and Zarek had no idea how to stop them. The situation was growing dire for the Draconian fleet. As Earth's resistance gained strength, Zarek began to question if he could still conquer this world. His options were becoming limited, and the prospect of retreat was becoming more real with every passing day. But then, in an unexpected turn, Zarek received a transmission from an unlikely source, a Draconian commander from a distant outpost. "We have encountered a problem, my lord," the transmission began. "The humans are not just fighting back on Earth. They are sending their resistance to the outer colonies." The news stunned Zarek. Not only had the humans pushed back the Draconians on Earth, but they were now taking the fight beyond their home planet. The resistance had spread like wildfire, igniting the flames of rebellion on Draconian-controlled worlds across the galaxy. Zarek's heart sank as he realized the full scope of what was happening. Earth was no longer a single battlefield. It was the heart of a revolution, and it was clear that this rebellion was not going to stop until the Draconians were driven from the galaxy. He slammed his fist on the console, causing a nearby officer to flinch. "This is no longer a conquest," Zarek said, his voice filled with bitterness. "It's a war, and we are losing." The Draconian fleet, once so sure of its dominance, was now on the defensive. Earth had become the spark for a rebellion that was spreading across the galaxy, and the Draconians were losing control of the situation. The tide of the war had turned, and it was clear to both sides that this was far from over. The humans had proven something no one had expected. They would not be silenced. They had not only fought for their survival, they had ignited a revolution that would change the galaxy forever. The war was no longer just a battle between two forces. It had become something bigger. The Draconian Empire, once feared across the galaxy, was now on the brink of losing a war they had believed they were destined to win. Lord Zarek paced back and forth in his command room, his mind racing. Every decision, every plan, now seemed like a desperate gamble. "Lord Zarek, the outer colonies are falling one by one." A voice from behind him interrupted his thoughts. It was General Rakas, one of his most trusted officers. She was visibly shaken, her usual calm demeanor replaced by a rare hint of fear. "Explain," Zarek demanded, his tone colder than usual. "The humans," General Rakas began, "they have somehow managed to rally the local populations on several Draconian-occupied planets. It's not just Earth anymore. They're striking at our colonies across the galaxy. The rebellion is spreading faster than we can control." Zarek's fists clenched. He had underestimated the resilience of humanity. What started as a small resistance on Earth had transformed into a galaxy-wide revolt. And now, Earth's success was emboldening other planets to rise up against the Draconian Empire. In the heart of Earth's resistance movement, Major Sarah Mitchell stood before a holographic map, studying the latest reports. The situation was dire. The Draconians had pushed Earth's forces to the edge, but somehow the humans were holding their ground. Sarah, a voice broke her focus. It was Lieutenant Noah Garcia, one of her most loyal soldiers. We've received word that the Draconians are retreating from the southern hemisphere. They're pulling back. Sarah's eyes widened. The Draconians were retreating. It seemed impossible. Only days ago, Earth's forces had been fighting to survive. And now, the enemy was on the defensive. Is it true? Sarah asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Noah nodded. Yes, it's true. We've also intercepted communication from their fleet. They're falling apart. They don't know what to do. The news sent a wave of hope through Sarah, but she knew better than to celebrate just yet. The Draconians might be retreating, but they were not defeated. Not yet. She turned to the group of commanders gathered around the table. We can't let our guard down, Sarah said firmly. This is our chance, but we must move fast. If we don't press our advantage, the Draconians will regroup, and we'll be back where we started. The plan was set into motion. Earth's forces were preparing for a final push to drive the Draconians off their planet once and for all. But they knew it wouldn't be easy. The Draconians were powerful, and they were not used to losing. Meanwhile, on the Draconian flagship Drac Core, Lord Zurich stood before a group of his most trusted commanders. His face was filled with anger, his eyes burning with frustration. The humans think they have won, Zurich growled. But they are wrong. This is not over. We will crush them. His commanders nodded, but there was an air of uncertainty in the room. The Draconian fleet had suffered losses, and the human resistance had proven to be far more formidable than anyone had predicted. Zurich's confidence, once unshakable, was now beginning to crack. We will reinforce the southern hemisphere, Zurich continued, his voice low and dangerous. We will show the humans that they are not the ones who control this galaxy. But Zurich's mind was torn. His forces were stretched thin, and despite his defiance, he knew that the Draconians were running out of time. If the rebellion spread any further, the Empire would crumble. Back on Earth, Sarah's team moved quickly, launching attacks on Draconian strongholds. They didn't have much time before the Draconians could regroup and counterattack. Sarah could feel the weight of the mission bearing down on her. She had to make this work. Earth's future depended on it. The humans had the advantage of surprise and their growing knowledge of Draconian tactics. With every victory, they grew more confident. But Sarah knew that the battle was far from over. The Draconian fleet was retreating, but they were not gone yet. The final battle was approaching, and it would decide the fate of Earth. Sarah gathered her officers around a large table in the Resistance's underground headquarters. The holographic map of Earth flickered in front of them, showing the locations of Draconian forces still remaining on the planet. The Draconian strongholds were scattered, but Sarah knew that they were not invincible. They had already started to crack under the pressure. We have a chance to end this, Sarah said, her voice filled with determination. But we need to strike now. We can't let them regroup. Her team agreed, and preparations began immediately. Earth's forces would launch one final assault, a coordinated strike that would target the heart of the Draconian fleet. If they succeeded, the Draconians would be forced to leave Earth for good. But Zurich was not ready to give up just yet. He was willing to fight until the last of his soldiers fell. He had underestimated the humans once, but he wouldn't make the same mistake again. The final confrontation between Earth and the Draconians was approaching, and both sides were preparing for the battle that would determine the fate of the galaxy. The humans had fought hard for their survival, but now they had to fight for their future. The time had come. After months of hard fighting, humanity's forces had gained ground. They had pushed the Draconians from Earth's southern hemisphere and were now ready to make their final move. The Draconian Empire, once a dominant force in the galaxy, was now on the brink of collapse. But Zurich wasn't ready to give up just yet. On Earth, Major Sarah Mitchell stood at the front of a long table, surrounded by her most trusted commanders. The plan was simple: Launch a coordinated assault on the Draconian flagship, Drakkor. If they could disable the ship, the remaining Draconian fleet would be forced to retreat. It was a dangerous move, but it was the only one left. "We've come too far to stop now," Sarah said, her voice steady, but filled with a determination that ran deep. "The Draconians are already weak. This is our chance to end this war." The officers around the table nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. This was the final battle. If they succeeded, Earth would be free. If they failed, humanity's future would be uncertain. "We'll strike with everything we've got," Sarah continued. "No holding back. We need to cripple their fleet before they have a chance to regroup." Lieutenant Noah Garcia, standing next to Sarah, spoke up. "We've intercepted communications that show Zarek is planning a counteroffensive. They'll be ready for us. But we can't wait any longer. We need to move now." Sarah's heart raced. This was it. There was no turning back. She nodded at no. "Prepare the teams. We launch at dawn." Meanwhile, aboard the Draconian flagship Drakkor, Lord Zarek paced anxiously across the command room. His once immense confidence was now clouded by doubt. The humans had thrown them off course, and Zarek's once powerful fleet was now reduced to a handful of ships. But his pride refused to let him admit defeat. "We cannot lose to them," Zarek muttered, clenching his fists. "The humans are weak. They don't understand the power we hold." His officers, standing nearby, remained silent. The situation had grown dire. The Draconian fleet had been battered in the previous months of battle, and now it seemed that every move they made was countered by the humans. Zarek knew that the time for strategy had passed. They had no choice but to fight with all their might. "Prepare the fleet for battle," Zarek ordered, his voice cold and commanding. "We will crush them once and for all." As the Draconian fleet prepared for the final showdown, Earth's forces were also making their final preparations. The resistance had become a well-coordinated force, a symbol of humanity's resilience and strength. They had fought for their survival, but now they fought for their freedom. Sarah stood by the command center, her eyes focused on the holographic map of Earth. The Draconian fleet was concentrated around the Drakkor, the heart of their remaining strength. But Sarah's forces had a plan. They would split their forces into smaller groups to attack from multiple directions, overwhelming the Draconians with speed and surprise. "It's time," Sarah said, her voice unwavering. She looked around at her team, each one of them ready to face whatever came next. They had trained for this moment, and now it was here. The final assault began. Earth's ships launched into the sky, racing toward the Draconian fleet. The sound of engines roaring filled the air as Sarah's forces cut through the sky, heading straight for the Drakkor. The battle would be fierce, but the humans had one advantage: their determination. On the ground, the Resistance's soldiers mobilized, preparing to engage any Draconian ground forces that might try to stop them. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't afford to hesitate now. The fate of Earth rested on the success of this mission. As the two forces neared each other, the first shots were fired. The Draconian fleet launched a barrage of laser fire, but Earth's ships responded with quick maneuvers and precise counterattacks. The battle was unlike any the galaxy had ever seen, with both sides fighting with all their strength. The humans were relentless. They pressed on, despite the odds, knowing that if they lost now, all would be lost. Each ship in Earth's fleet was vital, each soldier crucial to the mission. And as the battle raged on, the Draconian fleet began to falter. Sarah watched from the command center, her eyes fixed on the battle. They were pushing forward, gaining ground. The Drakkor was within reach. "We've got them," Noah said, his voice filled with relief. "The flagship is within our grasp." Sarah nodded, but she knew the hardest part was yet to come. They needed to get past the Draconian defenses and disable the Drakkor before Zarek could react. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. "Keep going," she said, her voice filled with determination. "We're almost there." As Earth's forces fought their way closer to the heart of the Draconian fleet, the tension in the air was palpable. The final confrontation was about to reach its climax. Would the humans succeed in their mission, or would Zarek's pride lead to their destruction? The final battle was reaching its peak. Earth's forces had successfully pushed through the Draconian defenses, and now the Drac Corps, the flagship of the Draconian fleet, was within their sights. Sarah Mitchell and her team knew this was the moment that would decide the fate of Earth, and perhaps the entire galaxy. The Drac Corps towered over the battlefield, its massive form a testament to the power of the Draconian Empire. But it was damaged, weakened from months of constant fighting. Zarek, the commander of the Draconian forces, stood on the bridge, watching as Earth's ships closed in. "We can still win this," Zarek muttered, his hands tightly gripping the armrests of his command chair. His once unshakable confidence was now replaced with desperation. His fleet had been decimated, and Earth's forces were relentless, but he refused to believe the war was over. "We cannot fall here." The Draconian flagship fired another volley of plasma blasts, but Earth's ships dodged and returned fire with precision. Each shot that hit the Drac Corps caused a ripple of shockwaves, sending tremors through the entire ship. The humans were closing in fast. Sarah's heart raced as she watched the battle unfold on the command center's display. She knew they couldn't let up now. The final strike would come soon. "Launch the assault teams," she ordered, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "We'll board the Drac Corps and disable its core." Noah Garcia, Sarah's trusted lieutenant, nodded. "Understood. All teams are ready." Moments later, Earth's soldiers and special forces dropped from their ships and onto the Drac Corps. Their mission was clear: infiltrate the ship, neutralize any remaining resistance, and destroy the Draconian flagship from the inside. The battle on the ground was fierce, but humanity's soldiers pressed on with unyielding determination. The Draconians fought hard, but they were not prepared for the sheer willpower of the human soldiers. Every soldier fought with the knowledge that Earth's future depended on their success. Their training, their sacrifices, and their unbreakable resolve had brought them to this moment. As Sarah's team advanced, they encountered more resistance. The Draconian warriors, though strong, were no match for the tactical brilliance and teamwork of the humans. They moved with precision, neutralizing enemy forces and securing vital areas of the flagship. "We're almost there," Noah radioed in. "The core room is just ahead. It's heavily guarded, but we're making progress." Sarah clenched her fists. They couldn't afford to slow down now. The fate of Earth was hanging in the balance. She knew that once the core was destroyed, the Drac Corps would be no more. The Draconian fleet would crumble, and Earth would be free. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Sarah and her team reached the core room. It was a massive chamber, filled with the hum of Draconian technology. Zarek's last line of defense stood before them, his most loyal soldiers, ready to die for their cause. But Sarah's eyes narrowed with determination. "This ends now," she said, leading the charge. The ensuing battle was intense. Earth's soldiers, though outnumbered, fought with everything they had. With each strike, they pushed the Draconians back, inching closer to the core. Sarah and Noah were at the forefront, their weapons flashing as they cleared the way. Zarek, watching from his command bridge, knew his time was running out. His once proud fleet was on the verge of collapse. He had lost everything: the Drac Corps, his soldiers, and his empire. Desperation clouded his judgment, and in a final act of defiance, he ordered his ship to launch one last attack. But it was too late. Sarah and her team successfully reached the core and set the charges. As the countdown began, Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She had done it. They had done it. Earth had won. 5 seconds, Noah called out, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. 4, Sarah whispered, her eyes scanning the room one last time. 3, 2. The explosion was deafening. The Drac Corps shook as the core detonated, sending shockwaves through the entire ship. The Draconian flagship was no more. The remaining Draconian ships, now without leadership and direction, quickly surrendered or retreated into deep space. The battle was over. As Sarah and her team made their way back to their ship, they couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. The war had been long, and the cost had been high, but humanity had emerged victorious. Earth was safe. Back on Earth, the news of the victory spread like wildfire. The Draconian Empire, once a threat to all of humanity, had been defeated. The people of Earth cheered, knowing that their planet was finally free from the shadow of invasion. But for Sarah and her team, the victory wasn't just about defeating the Draconians. It was about showing the galaxy what humanity was capable of. Against all odds, they had fought and won, proving that no enemy, no matter how powerful, could stand against the spirit of Earth. As the dust settled and peace began to return to the planet, Sarah looked out at the stars, knowing that this victory was just the beginning. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson. Humanity was not to be underestimated. The war was over, but the story of humanity's resilience had only just begun.